As if losing to Burnley wasn't punishment enough, we are back at it 3 days later. This time we're welcoming him to the Emirates, a team that's actually good. So Lord knows how that's going to turn out for us. We're going to take a quick look at it. This is Blog on You Gunners. Thanks for tuning in today. I don't think anyone would pretend that we are not in a real shitstorm of a situation at Arsenal. I think it's the worst situation I remember the club being in more than 30 years. And I think that would probably be the same for a vast bulk of the fan base who don't remember as far back as the early to mid 80s when it was the last time the club was in a pickle this big. I don't quite know how we've ended up in this situation so quickly. It just seemed to come out of nowhere. Going into the international break, okay, we had a disappointing result against Villa, but things just fell off a cliff edge and we find ourselves where we find ourselves now, where we can't buy a point, we can't buy a brain cell between any of the players at key moments in the game. And as Arteta has been saying in his post-match press conferences, we can't buy a goal either. We just can't put the bloody thing in the net, which is what's really killing us. As slow and as boring and as turgid as our build-up play has been, we've got to take one of these chances eventually. And the more and the longer we go without taking them, the more pain we're going to suffer, frankly. We've got 3 games coming up in Southampton, Everton and Chelsea, which could easily be lost if we carry on not putting the ball in the net. Our defence isn't that bad, to be honest. But as you know, has been said many times before, you can win games conceding goals, but you can't win them not scoring them. So we're in a bad place. We've been getting better on the pitch, little bit by little bit, but it's not been enough, and it's time now to sort it out. How we do that is not a quick fix, as I think everyone recognises, but we've got to go some way to addressing the issues that have been plaguing this team, and they centre around achieving a sort of consistency and level of performance that rewards the effort put in by the players. And there are a lot of players who are not putting in enough effort to warrant a win, to warrant some luck. I speak about the likes of Xhaka, Willian, to a lesser extent Bellerin, who are not performing and continue to get in the side, and it's time to ride the pine. You know, I know Bellerin and Xhaka are suspended. Great. Those are changes that will have to be made. Willian needs to take his place on the bench. I don't think he's performed well this season. I don't think it's a case of him not trying. He just is suffering, as everyone is suffering, with the shit service, with the crappy midfield and the slow play. It's not how I imagine the boss wants us to play. It's not how the team wants to play. But we're limited by injuries to Thomas Partey and the inability of the players to do any better, and also the poor selection from the manager, which is on the manager. He keeps picking players that aren't performing because he has some sort of misplaced trust in them, and they haven't rewarded that trust. Thankfully, that issue's taken out of his hands this week. Hopefully, that will mean some greater and more prominent opportunities for kids who are going to at least put some effort in. They may not be at the technical level to dominate the bigger teams, but geez, you know, in the Europa League, they've done themselves no harm. You know, the likes of Reece Nelson, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Eddie Nketiah, Folarin Balogun, Emil Smith-Rowe, Joe Willock, the list goes on. We've got a clutch of kids who are hungry for it and are performing as well as can be expected for them to perform, you know, given all of the limitations of the Europa League opposition. These kids have done it, no fuss, no problems. They have really toiled in the competition, and it's time for them to come into the side. These suspensions and whatnot represent the perfect opportunity for them to be given some minutes at last, and let's see them do the biz. Let's see Ainsley come in at right back or in midfield. I don't even mind if Cedric comes in at right back. He can't do any worse than Hector's done. You know, so let's get him in. Let's get Reece Nelson in. If we can get him on the right wing, brilliant. Put Willian on the bench. Reece can't do any worse, for sure. Keep Saka in the team. He's producing. He's the only one that's producing of this side. Lacazette is really putting in a shift. I don't think anyone would deny that of him. You know, he's being asked to do a role that's not particularly conducive to winning games and scoring goals, but he's putting in a shift. I don't take that away from him at all, but I think he could stand to drop to the bench for this one, and we can get Emil Smith Rowe in that space and get someone on the ball who can play the pass that he needs to play. You know, Lacazette did okay in that role, and there were a couple of situations where a player who can pass would have done a hell of a lot better and may have even played someone in. So there are possibilities, and it's high time that we exercised some of those possibilities and put them in and see what they can do. Because if we continue down the road that we're currently plodding along, we will lose the next 3 and lose them badly. And God knows what sort of situation we'll be in then. I said in the blog that we're in a relegation battle, and I stand by that. And I think that battle could become more real to a lot more people and more acute after these 3 games. If we get anything less than 6 points, then we're really in the shit, frankly. There's no room for 3 defeats, but that is so possible given the way we're playing at the moment. Hopefully these changes will bring with them some upturn in fortune, some upturn in performance and some goals, and then we can perhaps look to making it through to January, getting Thomas Partey back and getting 1 or 2 bodies in, shifting some shit out and really having a base to start building from. We can't afford to limp through to January with nothing to show for it. But if we can muddle through till then, that's great. And I think that's key. The performances, if we can get some, brilliant. If we can see an upturn in form, great. But we just need to get some points on the board, I think, just to give ourselves some breathing space and to take some of the heat out of the situation, because it is building steadily. And it's creating pressure and it's creating niggly incidents that are leaking their way out, and all the while it builds a negative aspect around the team, which we could well do without at the moment. So let's get something. I can't say I hold out much hope for the Southampton game, given the good form they're in and the sort of football they're playing and the sort of pressure they're putting on opponents. That fills me with dread for our midfield. But if we can get some kids in who are perhaps less inhibited and less stolid and constipated than some of our other midfield options, then brilliant. So much the better. If they're gonna lose, at least they'll be giving it 100% and trying things, as opposed to losing in abject fashion, which has been the case for a month or so now. As you can see from the form guide here, we are in the shit, quite frankly. 1 point from 5 games, 4 defeats, all at home. It doesn't get much worse than that, really. It could easily have been 5 defeats on the bounce if Leeds would have put the ball in the net, given the multitude of chances they had. Another game where we, as the boss rightly said, threw away the points. So, yeah, we're in lousy form. Southampton are in pretty decent form on paper. We could be in for a real spanking, in for a real difficult night here. So, in some respects, we've not got much to lose, but in other respects, we dare not lose this one. We've just got to hope that form goes out the window, the mentality changes a bit, and we see some improvement building on the Burnley performance, which was better for all of its faults. There were periods of that game where we were playing better football, more progressive, more ambitious, more aggressive, more creative, but that wasn't sustained over the 90. And if we do that against Southampton, we could be in for a hiding. A lot of that depends on how Mikel decides to set up the game, for sure. If he decides to stick with a 4-2-3-1, then we may encounter some of the same problems, personnel dependent. If he decides to go with the 3 men at the back and play on the counter, that's a whole different ball game. But I think for the time being, let's assume that he's going 4 at the back and sticking with what he's got in an effort to make it work. Key men for this one, I have chosen this time Mikel Arteta for Arsenal. I would expect him, borderline demand for him to return to the starting 11. Frankly, he did well enough in the Europa League games. I'm not saying he pulled up any trees, but he scored, he set up some goals, he made sure, even in the games in which he wasn't particularly fantastic, that he produced something. And he has that knack, even when he's not doing particularly well. He comes up with something, a goal, an assist, a key pass. And that's an X-factor quality that not many other players in this side have, least of all Willian. At the moment. So, as I've said previously, Willian's got to drop to the duty, bring Pepe in, He wasn't particularly inspirational against Dundalk for whatever reason. Perhaps he just didn't fancy a cold night in rainy Dublin on an absolute road of a pitch. But I think he has the chance now to seize his place, show what he's about, get some shots in, create something, and change the dynamic on that right-hand side. And if he's paired up with Ainsley Maitland-Niles or Cedric, that's a whole different set of possibilities to work with, because Bellerin and Willian wasn't working particularly well against Burnley. It tended to run into a brick wall fairly soon. And that's partly for their own bad form, but partly because there was bugger all happening in front of them. Less than bugger all. There were just oceans of space in which no one was running into. That's not especially their fault. But we get Pepe in, we get Maitland-Niles or Cedric in, shifts the dynamic. Let's see what they can do. For Southampton, I've chosen James Ward-Prowse, who is in electric form for them, in a team that's firing on all cylinders. He's creating, he's scoring, his set pieces have been spot on for years. That won't change. We can't afford to give him free kicks or opportunities to get the ball in. If we can keep him quiet and cut off his possession and time on the ball, brilliant. That is good for us, bad for them. You know, he's a big source of opportunities for them. So we've got to take him out of the game. We've got to make sure he doesn't have the opportunity to hurt us. I know they can hurt us in several different positions on the pitch because they've got a lot of good players this season who are performing well. But he seems to me to be the hub of it. So let's target him. Let's keep him quiet. Let's get Pepe in the game. And let's keep our fingers crossed. As with Burnley, I won't be doing any predictions for this one because I have so much egg on my face. I might as well be a henhouse at this point. It's getting ridiculous in terms of trying to call what Arsenal do. To be honest, the best prediction is probably that we lose. Because if I'd have made that 5 times out of the last 5 previews, I'd have been spot on 4 times out of those. So I'm going to avoid that like the plague, like a shitty rag. I'm going to avoid predictions and just hope that we see something better than what we've been seeing. Fingers crossed it's not a loss, because I don't want to be in the realm of those possibilities and what that means for this club. So let's hope for better and leave it there. As ever, thanks for tuning in, Gunners. Thanks for sticking with it. Thanks for contributing to this group therapy session. I hope I can do a post-match with a little bit more to talk about than our abject misery. We can't keep losing. God knows we can't keep losing. Eventually we're going to score a goal and we might even get a point or two. So that's something to look forward to, if nothing else. Thanks for tuning in, and I will catch up with you soon. Take care.